Now we're going to make the asparagus, and the first part of making the asparagus frittata, of course, is picking up the asparagus as we've seen. Then what we're going to do is break the asparagus starting from the tip into small pieces, and you break it all the way down. When it no longer snaps, discard that piece, pick up the next one, and break it as long as it snaps. Now, what the Umbrian farm women often do is if they don't have enough asparagus, they're going to go out and pick vitalbe, which is a plant that grows wild, and the tips can be added and used in place of the asparagus, and the flavor is very much like that of the asparagus. So I also have just a few vitalbe tips to add in. They grow as a wild vine all over the place, and what's interesting is they sort of seem to have a symbiotic relationship with the asparagus. Wherever you have asparagus, you also have vitalbe. Okay, now we'll rinse them. And just a quick and easy rinse. And then this is our own olive oil from our trees, which we pick in November. We pick the olives. They're pressed in Assisi at the olive mill in the town of Assisi. So I'm covering the bottom of a nonstick Teflon pan with the olive oil. And then I'm going to turn it on high. And what I'll do first is add one piece of asparagus. And that first piece is going to tell me when the oil is hot enough to add the others. And have a look at these eggs. Look at that yellow yolk, almost orange. These are organic eggs from our dear farm neighbor Peppa. And of course these are going to be the best possible. If you can't get these, work with what you can. I would recommend always when you make a frittata to use organic eggs. I'm going to put in, let's see, 5, 6 is usually about the amount. And then just whip. The farm people would just, of course, use a fork. They're not going to bother with an egg beater. They're not going to bother with a whisk, but you can certainly, whip the eggs with a whisk if you prefer. Salt. The watchword to Italian cooking is QB, quanto basta. As much as you need, about that much salt. Maybe a little more. The trick is gauging your salt because we're going to add pecorino cheese to this as well, and that's quite salty. So I think the best way to make a frittata, especially an asparagus frittata, to which you'll add something like Parmesan or pecorino, you're going to have to experiment because it takes some trick to gauging the right amount of salt. When it starts sizzling, which it is now, it's time to put in the asparagus. Now I'm going to show you a little trick that my Sicilian mother-in-law taught me. She will add a tablespoon of hot water, and that whenever she makes the frittata, and that will cause the vegetables to cook faster. And sometimes she'd cover the pan, sometimes not. I'm going to let the water pretty much evaporate because I don't want too much water in the frittata. And then every cook has their favorite frittata pan. Mine is this old one. It's bent, it's decrepit. I've had it for 45 years. It was one of the first things we found in the farmhouse when we moved to our farm in Assisi. Our rent was $25 a month, no heat, no water, no electricity. And we just had a few old bits and pieces of this and that, a few odd things for the kitchen, and this was my frying pan lid, and it's still my frying pan lid. The important aspect of making a frittata, the most important step, is flipping the frittata. And the lid has to be larger than the pan so you can flip it right over, but it has to be light enough that you can actually hold on to it. This is my frittata lid. I wouldn't know what to do without this. As unattractive as it is, it's best for me. Okay, now it's about time to add the black pepper. The water's evaporated. Now I can put in the egg. And what I want to do now is bring the vegetables into the middle of the pan. I'm going to turn down the heat to low. So I can just, if I just move the asparagus here with a spatula, I can bring it to the center because this is a non-stick pan. So. Okay, now I'm going to turn it up again. And often my mother-in-law, Signora Vincenza, would also add breadcrumbs that will absorb the egg. But in this case, I'm not going to because that'll detract too much from the flavor of the wild asparagus. So all I'm going to add to the wild asparagus frittata is pecorino cheese. And I have some right over here. Now I'm going to add grated pecorino cheese. And these are 2 fine pieces of pecorino from Umbria. This is a sheep's milk cheese. And I've already grated some. So now I'm going to put some here, sprinkle it across the frittata. I like pecorino with the asparagus. I prefer it to the Parmesan because pecorino has a nice bite to it. And now what I'm doing is lifting the frittata and letting the egg run down. And I have to cook all the liquid egg on the top before I can flip it. Frittatas can be made with some steamed Swiss chard, onions, bell peppers. You might want to saute bell peppers with a bit of sausage. The Umbrian sausage, of course, is perfect for that. If you make a frittata with tomatoes, you'd add the tomatoes now, just before the cheese, rather than putting it on the bottom in the hot oil. Okay. My trusty old frittata lid, and it's always recommended that you flip the frittata over the sink. Especially because the first time's doing a frittata, it's likely that it's going to slide right off the lid and into your sink. It can be a mess. Okay, so here we go. I'm going over to the sink. And then it's a 180-degree turn immediately. This came out quite nicely. Now we're just going to slide it right onto the pan. Cook it 1 second on low heat, and it's done. Okay, before serving, you're going to flip it again and then just slide it into the pan. And then the great thing about a frittata is you can serve at room temperature. I often make frittatas hours before the guests come. And in fact, I'm not going to cut it yet because it would fall apart. So I'll wait till it's cooled down before I'll cut it and then serve it. It can be a main course, it can be an antipasto, an hors d'oeuvre. Buon appetito.